In the summer of 1985, 6-year-old Neil Bledsoe vanished from his own backyard in broad daylight. No witnesses, no trail, just gone. Years later, a sealed mirror arrives at his mother's home, and inside it, Neil's untouched fingerprint, identical to the one taken before he disappeared. Detective Anna Lopez reopens the case, uncovering physical evidence that defies time, logic, and everything investigators thought they knew. Now, the truth is no longer missing. It's trapped in glass, and what's inside may change everything. August 11, 1985, Norcross, Georgia. The afternoon was sweltering, 91 degrees, heavy air, still wind. At the far end of Brook Hollow Lane, a quiet cul-de-sac surrounded by pine trees and chain-link fences, 6-year-old Neil Bledsoe was playing alone in his backyard. He wore a red tank top with a cartoon dinosaur on the front, khaki shorts, and no shoes. A sprinkler clicked rhythmically nearby. It was an ordinary Sunday. His mother, Marie, was folding laundry by the kitchen window, glancing outside every so often. She later said the last time she saw Neil, he was chasing a butterfly with a plastic water gun in his hand. At 3:18 p.m., she heard the faint metallic squeak of the gate hinge. It didn't sound like a full swing, more like it shifted slightly. When she looked out again, the yard was empty. She called out his name once, then again. She stepped out barefoot, scanned the fence, checked the garage. No Neil. She checked the bathroom, closets, under the bed. Still no Neil. At 3:27 p.m., her voice was already shaking when she dialed 911. 911 call transcript, AUG 11, 1985, 3:27 p.m. Dispatcher. Gwinnett County 911. What's your emergency? Caller. My son. He was just here. 6 years old. I looked away for 2 minutes. He's gone. Dispatcher. Ma'am, is this the address at 1442 Brook Hollow Lane? Caller. Yes, please. I've checked the whole yard. The gate's open. He's not in the house. Please send someone. Dispatcher. Units are en route. Stay on the line with me. By 3:39 p.m., the first officer arrived. Tony Ellis, Patrol Unit 21B, parked by the curb and began sweeping the yard. No signs of forced entry. No trampled plants. Just a pair of small, muddy footprints near the vegetable patch. And nothing else. They ended cleanly a few feet from the back fence. No scuff marks. No broken boards. At 3:45 p.m., Neil's father, Glenn, got the call at his roofing site and drove home fast, ditching his truck 2 blocks away. He ran the rest of the way, still in his work boots, hands shaking. He found Marie in the driveway, crying into her hands. No one had seen anything. By 4:12 p.m., the search perimeter was expanding. A helicopter from the sheriff's department took off from a nearby airstrip with a FLIR thermal imaging system on board. It scanned the woods, the creek bed, and the utility access road behind the neighborhood. No sign of a small human body, no heat signatures, nothing. Neighbors gathered. Some brought flashlights. Others called out to Neil across fences. A boy down the street said he'd seen a strange truck earlier that day. He didn't remember the color. A girl said she heard barking around 3 p.m. The Bledsoes didn't own a dog. At 5:03 p.m., the evening sun dipped low, turning the trees gold. Streetlights buzzed to life. Volunteers linked arms and combed the cul-de-sac. They called Neil's name again and again. There was no answer. At 6:45 p.m., Officer Ellis entered the case into the National Missing Persons Database as code 089V, child under 10, last seen unsupervised, possible abduction. By then, local news crews had begun to arrive. Camera lights flickered behind police tape. A reporter whispered the word, vanished, on live television. The backyard where Neil had played just hours earlier now sat still and silent, a child's water gun lying forgotten in the grass. Was it an abduction, a misstep into the woods, or something else entirely? By dawn on August 12th, the Bledsoe residence had become the center of a rapidly escalating search operation. The temperature was already climbing past 80 degrees Celsius before sunrise, and the air was thick with ground fog rising from the creek bed. At 6:11 a.m., Gwinnett County Search and Rescue marked off a quarter-mile radius grid around the Bledsoes' home. Every quadrant was assigned to rotating patrol teams, trained volunteers, and one bloodhound unit from neighboring Fulton County. Detective Mark Hall, the lead investigator from missing persons, arrived just after 7 a.m. His first order was to retrace Neil's last known steps, beginning in the backyard. The fence gate showed no sign of damage or tampering. The latch was slightly loose, easy enough for a 6-year-old to push open but not fall open by itself. Neil's muddy footprints had been partially washed away overnight by light rain. What remained was a single heel mark, barely visible near the northern edge of the fence where a patch of grass thinned into gravel. By 8:23 a.m., canine handler Rebecca Dunn released her bloodhound, Asa, on a scent article, Neil's t-shirt from the hamper. The dog followed a trail from the backyard, through the side gate, and across the neighboring yard, then stopped at the edge of the street. No turn, no continuation, just a dead end, as if the trail had simply evaporated. Searchers fanned out along the tree line and storm drain access points. Officers knocked on every door within a half-mile radius. Helicopter sweeps resumed overhead, this time with a secondary scanner, side-scanned Sonar Kongsberg EM-2040, on standby for nearby creek searches. By 10:40 a.m., the local fire department had lowered a pole cam into 3 drainage culverts. All clear. At 12:16 p.m., a lead came in. A woman from 3 blocks away reported seeing a red vehicle, maybe a Ford Bronco, early 80s, speeding away from Brook Hollow Lane around the time Neil vanished. She couldn't recall the license plate. When pressed, she admitted she wasn't sure about the exact day. Every tip mattered. Detective Hall called for security footage from local gas stations and intersections, but in 1985, surveillance was rare and unreliable. Tapes from nearby convenience stores showed nothing helpful, just static silhouettes and overexposed pavement. Back at home, Marie Bledsoe sat on the living room couch, still in yesterday's clothes. A local pastor and family friend stayed with her while Glenn returned from the police station, his shirt soaked through. Reporters gathered across the street, kept back by a single strip of yellow tape. One of them shouted, "Was your son ever prone to running away?" Glenn didn't answer. By nightfall, 148 volunteers had searched 62 acres, 4 drainage ditches, and 3 miles of creek bed. Not a single item was found. No backpack, no shoes, no toy, nothing. At 8:07 p.m., Detective Hall stood at the front of the property and delivered the first official statement to reporters. "We have no reason to believe Neil ran away. He was in a safe, enclosed space. He vanished in broad daylight. We are asking the public to come forward with anything they saw on or near Brook Hollow Lane yesterday between 3:00 and 4:00 p.m. No detail is too small." Despite the growing media attention, the department still had no working theory, no physical evidence, no suspects. At 10:22 p.m., Marie awoke suddenly from where she'd dozed off on the couch. She thought she'd heard the back gate creak again. When Glenn rushed out with a flashlight, the yard was still. The golden window, the first 48 hours, was closing. Comment, hope, if you'd search forever. August 13th, 1985, Day 3. The early morning brought thick clouds and an unrelenting 87-degree humidity. By 6:45 a.m., the search perimeter had been expanded from a half-mile radius to nearly 2. Police, volunteers, and canine units now included wooded easements, rail corridors, and abandoned structures. Neil's case had already been assigned federal oversight. The FBI had dispatched a field agent from their Atlanta office. The Bledsoes' neighborhood became a logistical hub. A white command trailer was parked outside their home, its antenna rising above the rooftops. Clipboards, radios, topographic maps. This was now a full-scale child abduction response. A single corkboard inside held pinned photographs of Neil, kindergarten class photo, a birthday picture, and a Xeroxed drawing he'd made 2 weeks earlier of a fire truck with wings. At 9:02 a.m., Detective Hall met with Special Agent Laura Beach, who was now coordinating federal resources. Beach ordered deployment of aerial FLIR sweeps, as well as search and rescue drones recently acquired by the sheriff's office. While the drones themselves were primitive by modern standards, battery-powered with a 10-minute flight time, they offered access to terrain the foot teams couldn't reach. One such area was the dried creek system to the north, overgrown and treacherous. A drone launched at 10:14 a.m. captured high-resolution images of something glinting in the underbrush. A patrol unit was dispatched to the location by foot. At 11:02 a.m., officers recovered a small plastic object from the brush, a green toy water gun, cracked near the barrel. Glenn confirmed it matched the one Neil had been playing with the day he disappeared. But no fingerprints were recoverable. The surface had been degraded by rain, mud, and heat. Still, it was the first concrete item linked to Neil since the moment he vanished. It was bagged and labeled. Evidence. Zozo 3, 1985 BL. The discovery shifted the search axis. By noon, volunteers had refocused on the North Quadrant, a stretch of ravine-laced woodland running parallel to a utility right-of-way. Here, teams used grid patterns, spray paint marks on tree trunks, and reflective tape to track covered ground. Some areas were so dense that machetes were issued. At 1:37 p.m., a state trooper helicopter flying grid path Sierra 4 picked up a possible movement signature near mile marker 8 of the old freight rail. It was fleeting, possibly a small animal, but the signal was enough to warrant an on-foot sweep. Ground teams found nothing. By 4 p.m., local news stations aired a segment featuring Neil's kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Lorraine Stokes. Neil was quiet, she told reporters, not the kind of child who wandered, always looked over his shoulder to see if someone was still watching. Her words hung in the air during the evening's news cycle. One anchor described the case as a slow-moving fever dream, a suburban ghost story unfolding in real time. That night, volunteers reported hearing something strange in the woods northeast of the neighborhood. Around 8:22 p.m., a group of 4 said they heard what sounded like a child's voice. 3 claimed it said, "Mama." 1 swore it said, "Gate." The area was swept immediately. No signs of life, no animals, no recordings captured it. But the report was logged. Audio techs enhanced surrounding recordings, boosting frequencies from 6 to 12 kilohertz. Nothing definitive emerged. Yet those 4 volunteers, 2 former EMTs, 1 off-duty paramedic, and a school janitor, held firm in their story. With no other leads, even a phantom voice was worth chasing. So why was a single toy found miles from the last known location? And how did Neil get there? By August 14th, the story of Neil Bledsoe's disappearance had exploded beyond Norcross. Major networks, ABC, CBS, CNN, ran segments on the missing child during their evening broadcasts. Photos of Neil flashed across millions of televisions. A boy with tousled brown hair, gap-toothed smile, and quiet eyes. News anchors used words like "vanished without a trace" and "every parent's nightmare." At 7:06 a.m., a report came in from Dawsonville, nearly 45 miles north. A woman claimed she saw a boy matching Neil's description at a truck stop restroom, accompanied by a man in a gray sweatshirt and camouflage pants. She didn't approach them, she said, but she felt something was off. Surveillance footage, pulled 6 hours later, showed a boy with similar features, but clearer frames revealed it wasn't Neil. His shoes were the wrong size, his hair too light. Another dead end. By midday, the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Department had logged 27 separate tips from across Georgia. Many were vague. "I saw him at the mall. There was a boy crying on the bus. He was hitchhiking on Route 78. None checked out. Then, one call stood out. At 3:18 p.m., a man named Jerome Salter phoned in, claiming he saw Neil around 3:30 p.m. on the day of the disappearance. Salter lived 2 blocks from the Bledsoes. He said he'd been fixing his car in the garage and saw a small boy walking behind a delivery truck that had pulled into the cul-de-sac. According to Salter, the truck had no company markings, just a white cab with a tan trailer. "Looked like furniture movers or something," he told officers. That boy, he didn't look scared. But he didn't look like he belonged with them either. Detective Hall and Agent Beach conducted a follow-up interview at Salter's home at 5:12 p.m. There were inconsistencies. Salter couldn't recall the truck's make or license plate. His timeline didn't align with known delivery logs. When asked why he waited 3 days to report, he shrugged. "Didn't think anything of it till I saw the news." Neighbors described Salter as a loner, harmless but unreliable. He had once reported seeing people watching him through the streetlights. His statement was logged, then flagged for low credibility. Still, every detail was noted. By now, The media presence on Brook Hollow Lane had doubled. Satellite vans lined the curb. Reporters shouted questions at officers. Some even tried to enter the property under the pretense of offering help. A clip from one national broadcast showed Marie Bledsoe closing her blinds slowly, visibly shaking. Glenn, growing more agitated, confronted a cameraman in the driveway. "He's not a headline," he shouted. "He's our son." The footage aired within the hour. Later that evening, Detective Hall received a voicemail from a man in Mississippi who claimed to be a retired PI. "I've seen this before," he said. "Back in 72, Tennessee. Boy gone, no trace, just like this. Sometimes it's the mirrors. Don't laugh. I can prove it." The call was dismissed. At 9:31 p.m., another tip came in from an anonymous caller. A static-laced voice said, "Check under the red rock, Brook Hollow. You'll know the one." Then hung up. The message was traced but untraceable. Public payphone, no camera coverage. Officers searched the cul-de-sac, examining every red stone, garden ornament, and landscaping rock within 3 blocks. They found a chip bag, a broken keyring, and a raccoon nest. Nothing else. False hope had begun to wear down the team. Each bad lead drained resources. Each new theory splintered focus. But someone, somewhere, had to know what happened to Neil. Why would so many false sightings emerge, unless he was truly everywhere people looked? By the end of August 1985, Neil Bledsoe's name had faded from the nightly news. The search was scaled down. Volunteers returned to their routines. The command trailer was pulled from Brook Hollow Lane. The official stance shifted from active investigation to open but unsolved. Marie and Glenn Bledsoe remained in their home. For a time, Marie refused to touch Neil's room. His drawings stayed on the wall. His shoes remained by the door. A tiny cardboard box of birthday candles, he'd just turned 6, sat unopened on the kitchen counter for nearly 2 months. Detective Hall, still lead on the case, continued to follow up on outlying tips. One came from South Carolina in November 1985, claiming a boy matching Neil's description had been enrolled under a false name at a private religious school. That lead disintegrated within 48 hours. Wrong birth date, no match on fingerprints, no connection. Another dead end. By January 1986, the case file had ballooned to over 900 pages. Evidence was boxed and shelved at the Gwinnett County Records Facility under reference code BL 1985 Neil. Inside the cardboard archive were bagged articles, the plastic water gun, Marie's handwritten list of Neil's classmates, and 37 photos from the search grid, all labeled, time-stamped, and untouched since. On the first anniversary of Neil's disappearance, the Bledsoes held a small vigil in their backyard. Only a few reporters came. No new leads surfaced, no tips, no suspects, just silence. In 1987, Glenn took a job driving long-haul rigs, often gone for weeks at a time. When asked why, he once told a neighbor, "I need to keep moving. If I sit still, I hear the backyard." Marie joined a local grief support group. She stopped attending after 6 meetings. She told a counselor the others wanted closure too quickly. The investigation lost momentum. Resources were reallocated. New cases took priority. By late 1988, Neil Bledsoe's file had been officially classified as inactive, though technically never closed. The last documented field action was dated April 6, 1989, a call to a now-defunct furniture outlet in rural Alabama. It turned out to be a data entry error in a moving log. The call lasted 4 minutes. By the summer of 1990, 5 years had passed. Neil's case became a footnote in law enforcement briefings. Rookie detectives were shown the file during orientation, a textbook example of how a case can vanish just as suddenly as a child. Marie still woke up some nights to the sound of a gate creaking, though no one else ever heard it. She kept Neil's toothbrush in the medicine cabinet. Every week she wiped the dust off his sneakers, still lined up beneath the hallway bench. And every year, on August 11th, she waited by the phone. If you believe a child should never be forgotten, comment, "Never give up" below. The 1990s arrived without answers. Neil Bledsoe's name became one of many listed on aging caseboards and database printouts, slowly migrating from active files to archived folders. In the Norcross Police Department, his case box was stored on the third shelf of the cold case room, labeled in red ink, BL 1985 Neil, no body, no witness, no suspect. Marie and Glenn drifted into quiet, parallel grief. Glenn's long-haul routes took him farther and more frequently across state lines. Marie started working at a second-hand bookstore. She rarely spoke about Neil in public anymore, but each year she mailed a birthday card to an empty P.O. box she had set up under Neil's name. She never got a response. In 1993, a new detective named Ana Lopez joined the department. Young, meticulous, with a background in forensic psychology, she asked to review the cold cases. Neil's file stood out. No ransom note, no body, no witnesses. But the absence of evidence, she noted, was its own pattern. Lopez re-interviewed several original participants, including Detective Hall, now retired. He was frank. That case was a black hole. We threw everything at it. The woods swallowed him. Lopez started rereading every interview, cross-referencing tip lines and geolocation data that hadn't existed in the mid-'80s. She was particularly interested in inconsistencies, the strange delivery truck sighting, the anonymous Red Rock call, and the cracked water gun found miles away. She tried tracking down Jerome Salter again, the neighbor who claimed to have seen the unmarked truck. His home had since been sold. No forwarding address. His name didn't appear in any DMV records after 1991. No death certificate. No property. It was as if he, too, had vanished. In 1995, Lopez filed a formal request to have Neil's case reopened using evolving investigative techniques, including geographical profiling and the newly adopted VICAP system. Her request was denied. No new evidence, the file stated. Public interest had all but disappeared. A few local forums occasionally discussed the case, usually alongside other missing child incidents. Rumors spread that Neil had been taken by a family member, that he was sold across state lines, or that something supernatural had happened. These conspiracy threads were largely ignored by police, but Lopez read every one. In one forum, buried in a 1996 thread titled Georgia's Lost Kids, a user named SPC Mirror 86 wrote, "They never checked the glass. You ever hear about condensation shadows? Sometimes they come back." The post was quickly deleted. The user never posted again. That year, Glenn suffered a stroke and retired from trucking. He became reclusive, rarely answering the door. Marie kept working. Her bookstore changed owners in '98, and she quietly faded from the public eye. By 1999, Neil Bledsoe's case had not seen a new lead in over a decade. No witness, no item, no call, just a lingering absence. A 6-year-old boy who walked into the summer heat and never came back. But the box, BL 1985 Neil, was never destroyed. It sat in the archive, silent, waiting. Something was still missing. Not just the boy, but the why. In early 2001, advances in forensic technology began to ripple through cold case units across the country. DNA databases were expanding, geospatial modeling was becoming more precise, and digital fingerprint matching, once clunky and error-prone, had entered a new era of speed and accuracy. Detective Ana Lopez, still quietly advocating for Neil's case, seized the moment. On March 3, 2001, she submitted a formal request to digitize the original fingerprint cards from Neil's kindergarten enrollment, collected in 1984 during a routine school safety initiative. The prints had been captured using outdated ink-rolled forms and stored in county archives for over 15 years. Her request was approved. By March 14th, those prints were scanned into the newly updated aFES system, Automated Fingerprint Identification System v4.2, with significantly enhanced matching capabilities. At the same time, Lopez requested a review of all unidentified juvenile prints entered nationwide between 1985 and 2001. She flagged any partials found on unknown surfaces or sealed evidence in abandoned child-related cases. It was a long shot. The data field returned 116 partials. None matched. Then came the mirror. In October 2002, Marie Bledsoe, now 47, ordered a full-length standing mirror from a warehouse furniture outlet in northern Georgia. It was delivered to her home on October 29th, sealed in cardboard and shrink wrap. The receipt listed the unit as Model Ever FR SLV32, manufactured in Texas. She placed it in her bedroom, leaning it against the wall near her dresser. On the morning of October 30th, after showering, Marie stepped back into her room. Steam clung to the surface of the mirror. She noticed something small and smeared on the inside of the glass, not the outside. It was a tiny handprint, palm facing outward, child-sized. She stood frozen. Her hands trembled. The shape slowly evaporated as the condensation dried. But she had seen it. She knew it was real. Marie contacted the police. Officers arrived the next morning and carefully removed the mirror for analysis. The manufacturer confirmed the glass had been installed and sealed 1 week prior to shipment. One single panel, tempered, no access inside. Detective Lopez was immediately notified. The mirror was sent to a forensic lab under chain of custody order. Using vapor phase cyanoacrylate fuming and laser fluorescent dye techniques, they lifted 3 latent ridge impressions from the interior surface of the mirror. On November 8, 2002, the lab confirmed a match. Fingerprint match, 100% ID, Neil Bledsoe, right hand index finger. Investigators were stunned. There was no plausible entry point. The mirror had been sealed, wrapped, and shipped within the last 10 days. It came from a regional warehouse that processed inventory digitally and by barcode. No anomalies were found in its shipping logs. The mirror was manufactured in Plano, Texas. Neil's print, originally recorded in Norcross, Georgia in 1984, somehow appeared inside a sealed mirror pane made 17 years later. Lopez filed an emergency inquiry with the FBI. How did a child's fingerprint, unchanged, unaged, appear inside a product made 2 decades after he disappeared? What had been a cold case was now something stranger, something unprecedented. What if Neil wasn't missing, in the way anyone had imagined? Comment, found, but how, if you'd reopen this case without hesitation. December 6, 2002. Following the fingerprint discovery inside Marie's mirror, the investigation turned toward physical geography, specifically the creek bed behind the Bledsoe home. Detective Ana Lopez secured approval for a sonar sweep using the Kongsberg EM-2040, a side-scan unit capable of mapping submerged objects with high precision. The device was deployed by boat, scanning the overgrown waterway in slow, overlapping passes. At 3:11 p.m., during Pass 3 over Sector 9B, just 0.4 miles from the original property, operators flagged an anomaly. Roughly 5 feet long, 2 feet wide, perfectly smooth, with reflectivity consistent with glass. It was embedded in the silt at a shallow angle. There was no debris trail, no metal casing, just one flat surface, buried under years of sediment. Divers entered the next morning. Diver log, December 7, 2002, 08:24 a.m., water temp 49 degrees, visibility low. 08:41 a.m., located target, mirror-like surface. 08:46 a.m., object cold to the touch, non-metallic, appears fused to surrounding silt. 08:50 a.m., minor vibration when touched. 08:53 a.m., exiting, visual distortion reported. A remote camera was sent in next. Footage confirmed the object was a frameless mirror pane, with no cracks or warping despite long-term submersion. Surrounding tree roots appeared to avoid contact with it. Arrangements were made to extract it. But overnight, a sudden rainstorm flooded the creek. When the team returned, the mirror was gone. No drag marks, no breakage, just gone. This was the second mirror connected to Neil, and the first that investigators had physically seen in the wild. But it slipped through their hands. Why was it there? How long had it been waiting beneath the surface? And who, or what, put it there? Comment. I saw the sign if you believe mirrors can carry messages no eye was meant to see. February 3, 2003. 2 months after the creek mirror vanished, Detective Ana Lopez received a message from a retired county inventory clerk. While reviewing long-term storage logs, he flagged an item stored since 1994, a mirror recovered from a rural home clearance outside Norcross. It had never been claimed, never examined, just boxed and shelved. Lopez had it transferred to the lab the same day. The mirror was standard in size, 36 by 24 inches, but its backing was unusual, layered, thick, with a dull metallic sheen. Under humidity testing, no changes appeared. But when a UV scan was applied to the glass surface, two smudges lit up, small, human, nearly perfect. Latent print extraction confirmed it. Match: Neil Bledsoe, left middle finger, 100%. This was now the second verified fingerprint of Neil's on a sealed mirror, 15 years after his disappearance. The second print was partial, smaller, not enough to match, but it didn't belong to Neil. Forensic techs analyzed the silver backing with micro-laser confocal imaging. Within the reflective layer, they detected a faint lattice of biological material, trace organics consistent with human skin cells, too old for viable DNA, but human nonetheless. The mirror had no tampering. It was factory sealed, its surface untouched for years, yet inside, Neil's fingerprint had waited, undisturbed, unaged, impossible. Lopez filed an updated case report. The theory was no longer child missing. It was child still present, in ways that defied tracking. The mirrors weren't just evidence. They were the only known surfaces he had touched since 1985. No trail, no body, but two fingerprints, left inside objects that were never open. Something wasn't adding up.